YouTube. That was Joachim Andersen's Opus 41, Etude number 17, the Allegretto. And we're going to look at 3 different ways to practice this etude to help work on those very wide intervals and help increase your flexibility while you're playing. So a large part of what you need to learn on the flute is how your air has to change, how your embouchure has to change in order to get comfortable with each interval that you play. So what I find when I'm playing wide intervals is that generally the first time is not always the best time, but if I repeat this same interval multiple times, I get more and more comfortable with how that interval works and what my embouchure and my airstream has to do. So the first technique is to just do some repetitions of those intervals. And you can choose specific numbers that you use to repeat, or you may find, and you probably will find, that some intervals are more difficult than others, and so they need some more repetition. So I started with repeating each interval 3 times, and that gives me enough to get pretty comfortable with each interval. As I go on though, picking up in the 5th measure, suddenly those intervals get a little wider. So that one, the minor 7th, is a more awkward interval, so I may need to spend a little more time on that one. 3 might not be good enough there. Then moving on. There we go, that was better. So you want to listen to each interval, see how it responds, and repeat it until you're comfortable. So that's the first way to go through, and then after you've gone through all of these repetitions, the idea then is to gradually reduce the number of repetitions that you have to do of each interval in order to be comfortable. So the second way I practice this, after I've gone through and gotten comfortable with all of the intervals, is I'll take one measure at a time, and then I'll stop and take all the time that I need to take a perfect, relaxed breath, then play the second measure. Stop and take a perfect, relaxed breath. This gives me a little time in between each measure to evaluate what I've done and to prepare to play the next measure. So you can see I have some time to really work on those measures and make sure that I'm getting one measure played correctly. The other thing that I gain by practicing that way is one measure in this etude is only 6 notes. And 6 notes I can understand pretty completely. I can really hear where each note needs to be and whether I hit the mark or not. Once I'm comfortable with that, then I can start expanding my phrase, and now I can put 2 measures together before my perfect breath. And then I can add 4 measures and gradually expand my chain of measures and so forth. So once I'm done playing repeated intervals, and then I play 1 measure at a time and gradually add them together, the third way that I like to practice this one is to actually transpose it from A flat to A major. Now there's a couple of reasons for this. Number one, that's a good opportunity to practice a transposition that flute players often have to do, which is a D flat piccolo transposition. So D flat piccolo is the only instrument that transposes up, and it transposes up a half step. So if you are playing a C instrument and you're reading a D flat piccolo part, you will need to transpose that part up a half step. So by changing this etude from A flat major to A major, you're practicing the same transposition that you would need to use if you were reading a D flat piccolo part. Granted, most D flat piccolo parts transpose from a sharp key to a flat key rather than the way that we're doing it, but it's still a really good practice. So when you're doing this, every note that is flat becomes a natural, every accidental that is natural becomes a sharp, and we have a few sharps that will become double sharps in that second section there. So that's the first reason I like to do that transposition. The second reason is, now in the first section of this etude, instead of going up to that E flat, which is a pretty nice note to go up to, suddenly we're going up to E natural, which is not quite so nice a note. So it's a good opportunity for us to really work on that E. So we can take those same techniques of repeating intervals, playing one measure at a time, but now we're going to do it in A major. So that one's an A sharp now instead of an A natural. And so on. And then the next step would be one measure at a time. And then gradually adding those measures together. So we've looked at repeating intervals to get to know how each interval works, looking at one measure at a time so that you can hear how the intervals in that measure should sound, and also so you can get used to what your airstream and embouchure have to do, and then transposing it to the key of A major to help practice D flat piccolo transposition and to work out that high E natural a little bit. So I hope you find these tips helpful for this etude. If you like what you see, I invite you to subscribe, and we'll see you next time.